Welcome, everybody, and thank you for making the time today. You're here because you hold one of the hardest, most understood responsibilities in business, predictable revenue. Today, I'm going to shift how you look at forecast accuracy, leadership inconsistency, and execution permanently. My promise is simple. By the end of the session, you'll see exactly why your team performance varies, why forecasts swing, and why no amount of dashboards, training, or enablement will fix it unless you fix the underlying leadership issue. This session was built for CROs, VPs of sales, and revenue enablement people. If you are accountable for forecast accuracy, responsible for manager performance. If your leadership team is good but not consistent, this session is for you. Because here's the truth. If you own the forecast, then you must own the infrastructure that produces it. Okay, now I'll talk a little bit about myself. I'll give you an overview. Here's a quick overview of who I am and why I'm doing this work. For the last 30 years, I've been a VP of sales. I've run my own sales leadership consulting organization, and I've helped CROs and VPs of sales develop coaching cultures, stabilize forecasts, eliminate leadership variability, and engineer predictable sales growth. I've helped teams achieve 30% increase in a 26-week period, and everywhere I go, I see the same pattern. Your forecast is never more accurate than the discipline coaching of your managers. Once you understand that, everything starts to click in. Let me start with a question and answer it honestly. Does your organization suffer from either too little information or too little consistency? Most companies today are flooded, overloaded with data. They have dashboards, all types of tools, KPIs, activity metrics, and AI insights. They are information rich. The problem is they're system poor. Data is great, it creates visibility, but only systems create consistency. What I just shared was some of the symptoms, but not the root cause. The root cause is what I call variability tax. It consists of execution inconsistency across managers, different qualification standards, different coaching rhythms, and different definitions of rigor. Every inconsistency your organization has creates what I call revenue leakage. You'll lose money, and leadership variability is the biggest hidden P&L threat in most organizations. Leakage is the killer of achieving your sales targets. Weak coaching costs you revenue. Poor qualifications waste tons of time of your salespeople. Inconsistent rigor, execution fails. When leaders behave differently, the organization behaves differently. When organizations behave differently, performance becomes unpredictable. And unpredictable shows up in your pipeline and in your forecasts. The hard cost, and I don't want to sugarcoat it, of leadership variability is costing you big time. 500K per underperforming manager, 20 to 30% pipeline slippage, 5 to 7% forecast swings. Think about that. One manager who isn't coaching or properly qualifying can drain over $500,000 from your business. Not because they're bad, but because the system around them doesn't enforce behavior. You can have great reps, great tools, great training. But if your manager's behavior varies, performance varies. You cannot scale inconsistency. These are the problems when companies scale and grow quickly. And in most organizations, manager behavior is the least consistent part of the revenue engine. Here's the breakthrough. Performance does not start with reps. The root cause, as I said before, is leadership variability. When managers coach differently, qualify differently, inspect differently, you get different results. This is not a people issue. This is a system design issue. Fix the system and performance stabilizes. This is where many CROs get stuck. Dashboards give you visibility. Training gives your reps knowledge. Enablement provides great support for the sales team. But none of these things enforce leadership behavior. Your problem is not a tool issue. It's absence of a leadership operating system. And that's exactly what I'm going to cover over the next few minutes of the presentation. For those of you who know me, I talk about the power of coaching. And what I've begun to realize is when I've implemented coaching programs in organizations, coaching alone isn't enough. If you train your managers on how to coach, if you reinforce, that's pretty good, but you need an infrastructure, okay? And you need an infrastructure that basically coaching does not become optional, it becomes a must do. You remove inconsistency and you start to measure the impact of your coaching. So we know, and I'll talk about it, coaching improves performance, but only a system creates the predictability you need as you scale your organization. You seen the next slide? Okay, thank you. Uh, so, so the reality is, coaching is the most powerful performance multiplier in your revenue engine. Nothing else moves metrics like coaching does. So when a manager or when your managers coach consistently and effectively, you get skill mastery from your salespeople, your qualification rigor goes up, you get a more true pipeline. Um, you get better deal strategy, and you get faster ramp up of your reps. Things move quicker. So if you're coaching, you get a lot of good things. If you want to improve your win rates, pipeline quality, and rep performance simultaneously, coaching is a lever that moves them all. But as I said, coaching alone can't fix forecast accuracy. And coaching fails when there's a lack of operating system because you lack standards. Everyone's coaching differently. There's no cadence that you coach X amount of times and you have a rhythm to your coaching. There's a lack of reinforcement. So without reinforcement, any training dies and there's no accountability. Nobody owns coaching. It's a nice to do. It's something, okay, we want you guys to get out and coach. So if you want to improve your win rates, then you need to improve your coaching and build systems around it. So the next slide is many that CROs like to have a look at. And I look through and I have tons of data. There's tons of data on the internet that clearly states and proves that coaching drives performance. But I figured I'd take one stat, and the reality is coaching is the number one leadership activity that drives performance. And in this study, um, reps who got more coaching had a 28% increase in win rates, not because they had better tools, not because they had better enablement, and not because they had better comp plans, but because their leaders had discipline. And the real shocker is a large portion, maybe 80% of organizations, leave this money on the table because they have no infrastructure enforcing coaching behavior. That is one of the keys. So I don't know how many of you are leaving money on the table, but it's, it says 80% of organizations are there. How can you get that back? I talk about coaching it as a way of mitigating risk, especially in terms of variability. When coaching is inconsistent, you get much more higher risk. You get happy ear commitments. Your reps tell you what you want to hear, and you'll walk away happy but frustrated when it doesn't come true. Your pipeline tends to bloat as all of a sudden all these deals are closing by the end of the year. You get dirty inputs, and really it impacts forecasting. So when coaching is disciplined and enforced, the risks drop, you move to the right side. And coaching basically is the fastest way to stabilize your forecasts. But here's one of the big problems with coaching. There's many, but I call it the sales leadership or the leadership self-delusion. And the stats show that 73% of managers think they coach. Yet only 31% of reps agree that they do, and only 19% of reps uh, get good coaching. So the question becomes is, are your sales leaders bad or is the system bad? And my premise is that your sales leaders are doing a good job, but they need a system to help them coach and coach consistently. So let me introduce to you um, an approach that I've labeled as sales leadership infrastructure. Okay. And we've covered why dashboards, more training, and more enablement won't solve your variability problem. And after 30 years of working at this as a VP of sales, as a coach slash consultant, here's what I concluded. CROs don't need any more tools. They have stacks and stacks within their stacks. They need a system to enforce and reinforce coaching. A leadership operating system that eliminates variability and improves and standardizes execution. And I call it sales leadership infrastructure. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what SLI is, how it works, why it solves issues your tools never will. So here's the four pillars of the operating system that I talk about. It starts with assessment. So evaluating where your sales managers are in terms of coaching skills, and this is up through the organization. Many organizations do this. They'll assess their managers' uh, development, basically training their managers, giving them tools, and making them understand how coaching works. That's the development part. Here's where most organizations, their system falls down. When it comes to reinforcement, there's no one really reinforcing the frontline managers' coaching skills. There's no practice. There's no continuous improvement. Once you've done development, we send them out and we say, okay, go coach. The other area that I've come to realize that's missing, which has become a key, especially when you want to scale, you want to create standardization between your managers, remove variability, is enforcement. Coaching should be a non-negotiable, just like sales rep making sales calls. The fact remains that in many cases, coaching is a nice to do. It falls to the bottom of sales managers' lists. With one organization I worked with, they had a set number of coaching days that they needed to follow through on to hit their KPI. So unless coaching is a must do and that you're inspecting the coaching and enforcing it, coaching alone cannot solve your variability issues. So here's an illustration. I spent a bit of time trying to see how to best illustrate it, but uh, as you scale your organization, you have your third line managers, which is most cases your CRO, and their job is to set the non-negotiables. Okay, coaching is our number one priority. We shall be out in the field coaching. We shall use coaching field visit reports. Each of our salespeople should have a development plan. The second line leaders, your RVPs, their job is to inspect and enforce what the CRO has put in place. And your frontline guys or gals, their job is to coach and to execute. The problem is that this line, and I've seen it in many organizations I've chatted with, don't really do that job. And the whole system, if this breaks down, the whole system breaks down. So second line leaders, their job is to inspect and enforce consistently, ensure frontline managers operate with the same rigor, and maintain alignment between strategy and field execution. And this is one of the challenges when organizations scale, as I said, over 10, then they add one second line leader, maybe over 20, they're adding two second line leaders. I'm talking about 20 managers. And really, for to create predictability, everybody needs to be doing their part of the job in enforcing coaching to reduce variability and all the wonderful things that come with it. So how do we supercharge your revenue engine? And by implementing a system, one, you improve behaviors. Let me just check my slide notes here. Whoops. Okay, so just so I get it all, one, it changes behavior. Okay, how your managers coach, how they qualify, how they inspect, and how they lead. And behavior becomes consistent. So that's number one in terms of supercharging. When behaviors become consistent, execution becomes consistent. Your cadence, your rigor, your pipeline hygiene all help in terms of creating disciplined execution. And when execution becomes consistent, guess what? Your results come and they become consistent and less variable. So predictability, many CROs, get upset. Their jobs are on the line if they don't have predictability, but it starts with leadership behavior. So when you have a system in place that ensures coaching and enforcement of that coaching, things change. And it eliminates the whole thing of inconsistent coaching, some managers coaching, others not, qualification drift, that we're qualifying deals the same way. We get rid of this stuff of people just shoving stuff into their pipeline. Leadership variability reduces, underperformance gets addressed, and systems that don't sustain get eliminated. So what happens when you have a system in place to ensure coaching, because coaching alone can't do it, it replaces the chaos or the firefighting I talk about in my special report, and it basically introduces discipline. So these are the five levers that make or the power of SLI. One is having coaching cadence. How often you coach, who you coach, qualification discipline, uh, non-negotiable opportunity standards. So across the team, everyone understands what they're looking for. Pipeline hygiene, which every time we comes in the quarter, we're cleaning up our pipeline. No, that should happen every time we put something into our pipeline. And of course, that we have data that's readily inspectable, like MEDDIC or MEDPIC, is clean. The second line managers have an inspection rhythm that once a month, once a week, once a quarter, they're looking at the deals and they're scrutinizing them. And leadership enforcement, those behaviors become non-negotiable. And if it's a frontline manager, then the second line's responsibility is to make sure that those coaching cadence and qualification discipline and all the levers are being used. So here's the impact. Here's the outcome for folks who put a system in place. One, coaching becomes consistent. So coaching alone without reinforcement still remains inconsistent, even though we've taught the skills, we've measured where the manager can do better at coaching, but without inspection, coaching just fades. So when we have a system in place, coaching becomes consistent, qualification of deals becomes a non-negotiable. We have more rigors to how we look at deals. We have a much cleaner pipeline, which improves predictability. Forecast stability comes into place, and execution becomes a discipline that is followed by all within the organization. So hopefully everything is clicked, but before we have a operating system in place, the reality is every manager is different. They have a different version of leadership. They have a different version of how they coach. After putting a system in place, leadership becomes consistent, scalable, and predictable. And if that's what we're trying to achieve as part of our revenue growth engine, then an operating system is key. And just to reiterate, I've shared with you my approach to building an operating system, why it makes sense, how it improves performance, how it improves stock price, predictable growth. But what we're going to find in 2006 is there's going to be a much higher expectation on CROs that they have consistent forecasts. Forecasts fail from variability, not math. It's not a math issue. It's not how we add up the deals, but it's how we behave as leaders. Coaching, the bottom line is coaching is a great multiplier. And if you have the enforcement and the reinforcement in place, your whole system functions effectively. You have a predictability, and you remove some of the variability. So here's a pathway, as people say, Stephen, well, how do we get there? And I've sort of designed a three-phase approach. One is diagnosing, identifying how our managers coach, assessing the level of leadership discipline, and pinpointing the root causes of problems. And maybe it's as simple as I didn't know I had to coach. And then you start getting clarity within your CRO. What do they want? Building the operating system is in the next 2 months. You define standards of what the expectations are. Equip your managers with tools and cadence. Your enablement team can certainly play a big role there. And install the SLI rhythm. Okay, every week we go out and coach our reps. Once a month we review the pipeline, so on and so forth. And then the reinforcement and enforcement is really those second line managers sitting down with the frontline managers, inspecting their deals, ensuring that they're coaching. So they're looking at their coaching reports. If coaching reports become part of that operating system, and then you get a much more predictable system. It's a little more complex than I've explained. I've tried to narrow it down a little bit, but predictability isn't a project; it's an operating system. And I've attended many master classes and webinars, and at the end, there comes a pitch saying, "Hey, if you could save $500 today, if you do X, Y, and Z." That's not what it's about for me. If anything I covered resonates and you want to know more in terms of addressing your priorities in 2026, let's talk. There's no offer coming. When we talk, there's no pitch, there's no pressure, just a good conversation on what you want to achieve in the next year. And if any of these areas, leadership consistency, forecast accuracy, improving coaching effectiveness, improving your pipeline quality, executing with excellence, if these are things that you want to achieve in the next year, because we're coming up to 2026, we all know that, type in 2026 in the chat. And I'd be happy to set up a time to have a brief conversation. Again, I'm not here to pitch anything. I'm here to help. And if I can help you, it's my pleasure. And I'll open it up for questions. Are there any questions?